So I looked out in the audience tonight, counted. I stopped counting at about a dozen clients in the past, and I warned these guys that probably they'll be sitting out there with you the next time I'm up here, looking at me like, Jeff, what are you doing? Need money, come on.
Are you going to call them up?
Yeah, come on. We've generated some images of the potential development building that reflect the level of discussion I think that Eve's put out there now in terms of describing the scale of the building. One other element to the design process that we've started looking at, but it's very preliminary. We've generated a number of concepts already at this point, and this is just one of them that kind of got instant feedback positively from our clients, and so that's why it's been generated to this level, but the thinking is still very open. But one of the other real constraints to us, and I think you get the sense of that in the elevation, the south elevation of the building to the left side there, which is that this site is pretty steeply sloped, and so we're developing an architecture that relates to that as well as the rest of the programmatic functions that we're looking to get through. That's why this is looking like a streetscape kind of approach. Essentially, it's a three-story building, approximately 20,000 square feet, as Eve said. And I know I'll address directly, I guess, those of you that know me as the 25-year chairman of the city's preservation board and the design review board. Yes, we are taking down some existing historic structures, and we're taking down one that we moved a few years ago for the Osborne for the university. And as I've long said, and probably a lot of you have heard when you come in to present to us the other way also, we don't live in Venice. You know, I worked for, what got me into this is I worked for an architect in Venice for, my formative years in terms of learning about preservation. But we live in a living community. And it's not a question of opposing all change. It's what are we replacing it with. If Palladio gets knocked down but Michelangelo comes along, I'm happy in general. And so it's a question of the quality of structure that we're putting back, and that's why I'm here, is to work on that and work on making the best building that we can as the replacement. And I think Eve addressed this also directly. We're looking to do a substantial building that addresses the urbanistic concerns of this site and how it goes along. 28 years ago or so, I would say, I'm looking at Liz here, I think we may have been on an ad hoc committee when the courthouse was first considered, looking at locations in downtown. And one of the things we did at that point, which was the first beginnings of our, well, Jane certainly is the one that roped me into being on the preservation board. We began with looking at what did we want certain parts of the town to look like, and the Washington Street entry core was one of the prime locations that we looked at, and our interest was in having substantial buildings that followed along, sort of like the scale of the Kid City project that we did, moving that as being the levels and types of buildings that we're looking to have there, and that's what we're looking to achieve here. So this is, again, I think as Eve said, very preliminary, and it's open not even to discussion, because I think it's it's still in flux in terms of what the program is that's going to go into the building, and so the scale of that, and then we're still working on how this all gets sited and how it works, and it could be a more stretched out two-story building, it could be in pieces, but at this point it looks like it's a three-story building that has substantial mass to it. And I think Bob might want to come back to some of those urbanistic issues one more time.
Just in closing, we all do this because we love it, and these are all creative exercises that require interaction from every aspect of the community that's relevant. What is appropriate for this location? That's a debate and a discussion that happens in concept at this stage. And then when an application is filed, there's a formal process which includes the concepts of the basic tenet of democracy, which is public input, where key stakeholders are given the decision to determine whether or not what we propose is appropriate, and if so, how it should be developed, and if not, to tell us to perhaps think about something else. So the question is, at this location, it's a fascinating location for a number of reasons, and you bring it down to a couple of points. One is linkage. It's not a residential neighborhood. It has homes on it that are vacant, or at least will soon all be vacant, and the folks that have owned these homes, Wesleyan included, have chosen not to make long-term investments in their use as residential structures for many reasons that we could all know intuitively without getting into much detail. It's not the central business district of downtown Middletown. It doesn't deserve a high-rise or a largely dense commercial development, because it is, by most people's definition, somewhat of a fringe location. It is truly, in my view, a potential gateway that creates linkage between the Washington Street corridor and the Main Street corridor. So the question is, if we all agree that it potentially could be that, what's the best statement to make? How do we bring those different elements together? And one is with land uses, one is with design. And in terms of land uses, we enjoy the idea that Amados and Kid City create connections with themselves that allow young families to come to that environment and synergize by having participation at both locations. Certainly, the relocation of Wesleyan's bookstore in an expanded form with a national operator or a regional operator that certainly has more experience at running a wider range of services and goods that would include a linkage to children would create a great opportunity to bring those uses together and have just another place for children to patronize and enjoy a bookstore, which, by the way, if you travel 10 miles in any direction, I don't think you would find. So having the opportunity to have a bookstore that would service everyone from Old Saybrook to Cromwell to Meriden to possibly East Hampton, I think brings a unique opportunity for Middletown, certainly for the community. The second concept of linkage is Wesleyan itself, and I would never intend to be presumptuous to know what's best for you all, and that's why you're here today. But certainly the concept of linkage, of Wesleyan bringing it out to the community and branding it in a way that so many other national universities enjoy, is certainly it's fascinating enough and interesting enough to begin the discussion. And those of you that disagree, we'd love to hear if you do and why. And those of you that agree, we'd love to hear that as well. Because certainly we think one of the weaknesses of Middletown is the disconnect, the physical disconnect between the campus and Main Street and downtown. And we see this as one opportunity to bring that together, which then encapsulates Eve's discussion earlier, which is, we sit in a room, 6-pack of beer, and we look at land, and that's kind of what Eve and I love ever since Eve known business and opportunities to invest his career in, and I've been the same way. We love real estate. We love kind of looking at what we can create, and whenever you do that, you put yourself out there, and you're vulnerable because the world criticizes you. The world will say, hey, that looks pretty good or not, and we enjoy that. So we're not bashful about it. We take pride in it. And we will forever do this and try to do it as well as we can. So at the end of the day, we believe that this creates linkage to both the Main Street corridor and to Wesleyan itself. And we thought the bookstore was just as ideal as it gets in maybe addressing some of the school's issues with a bookstore that maybe could grow and could become more contemporary with what universities of your stature typically enjoy, and at the same time bring it closer to downtown and have the patrons of Main Street, the patrons of the base of Washington Street, enjoy a new and expanded facility that would not only service Middletown, but probably the region in a very significant way. So that brings us to the whole concept of zone changes and some of the other issues that will come up. It's a little premature to talk about that, but we're happy to try to. At the end of the day, that's an official application that requires an official scrutiny and an official decision by stakeholders. But certainly the debate and the discussion about the appropriateness of what is being presented to you is a worthwhile and relevant conversation. We thank you for coming out on a snowy and rainy day. We welcome your comments, and if you have any questions or comments, maybe I don't know if Nate how you'd like to organize it, but we're fine to participate.